2 years ago, a sight like this would have been unthinkable. Past the queues of tourists outside Lenin's tomb strides a British explorer with a string of military adventures behind him, most of them aimed at the defeat of communism. Former SAS officer Sir Ranulph Fiennes, along with Dr. Mike Stroud and Lawrence and Morag Howell, are working with Soviet comrades to attempt an unsupported trek to the North Pole. The hardware of the Cold War years is now put to a different use. Soviet military transport and access to forward bases of the Soviet army on the remote Arctic fringes are essential to Fiennes' game plan of attacking the pole from the northernmost pinnacle of Soviet Russia.
Yes, but they are interested in particular. What kind of military service did you have in your past? Can you tell them?
Yes, first I was in the Panzer tanks in Germany for 5 years. Then I was in the French parachute regiment for 6 months.
Затем он служил во французских парашютных войсках в течение 6 месяцев.
Then I was in the British Special Air Service for 1 year.
Затем он был в специальных воздушных войсках Великобритании в течение 1 года.
So then I went to the Sultan of Oman in Arabia.
Затем он служил на юге Омана, в Арабии, на Аравийском полуострове.
I was fighting for the Muslims.
Он сражался на стороне мусульман.
The other people were...
Against whom, Ren?
Well, the other people were good people from Karl Marx.
From Karl Marx?
Yes.
Другая сторона были отличные люди.
This way?
Родственники Карла Маркса.
Сейчас мы знаем, что...
Oh, very beautiful. Very. How fast? Yeah.
Как называется?
Is she from Georgia?
Да, Black Jack.
From Georgia?
Да, Русь.
Oh, Russian. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay.
We thank you very much for letting us fly in your aeroplanes.
Я know.
Fiennes and Stroud take off in an Antonov 12 military transport for the 14-hour journey to the northernmost tip of the Soviet Union. Their destination, the island of Shredny, part of Severnaya Semlaya, literally Northland, not discovered until 1912 and the last place on Earth to be mapped. As they edge closer to the Arctic, Ran and Mike must wonder if the Soviet Union offers them a greater chance of success than their 3 previous attempts from Canada. This is how Fiennes and Stroud first met in 1986. Stroud had flown out to Canada from England after Fiennes radioed for a partner to join him on his first effort to reach the pole unsupported. They'd never improved on the distance covered on that first expedition.
To have done the record of the furthest north unsupported is nice to know for one's own point of view inside oneself. But the goal of the pole, totally unsupported, must remain for me something which is sadly unattainable.
As supplies are unloaded, there's a chance to meet expedition organizer Dmitry Shparov. And with temperatures at -40°C at this lonely Russian airbase, there's a chance to reflect on the enormity of the human task that lies ahead.
This time, I have no reason for feeling any more confident than previous times, other than a sort of hunch that, when it was the 3rd time, I thought, well, maybe the old cliche, 3rd time lucky. This time I've got no cliche to fall back on, other than, I've got nothing to fall back on other than the new hope that because we're going from a different side, we might make it. That hope is, of course, slightly dampened by the number of days taken by those Russians who have gone from Russia to the pole using full support. And all of them have taken more days than we have got food for. And we're going, of course, without support and therefore heavier. However, we could get a break.
I think one of the problems, which, or if you call it a problem, that allows me to come back again and again, is that I don't remember what it's going to be like. I remember it in a very objective sense, that we will get cold, that you get intense pain in your hands and feet from the cold, that your back aches, you get sore in your crutch where it rubs, and it's perhaps one of the worst discomforts. You can't sleep properly, and you, from the word go, constantly want to stop, and so it's a sort of mental anguish as well. But although I see that objectively, subjectively I don't remember it properly at all. And I sometimes wonder if one of the reasons why some people come and do this sort of thing and others don't is that some people are better able to conjure into their mind discomfort and that puts them off, whilst people like myself and perhaps Ran are not so good at it. And so we remember the good times and come back and look for more.
1,000 miles across the Arctic Ocean in northern Canada, 3 Norwegians, Børge Ausland, Geir Rondeby and Erling Kage, get ready to mount their challenge to reach the pole unaided. A Canadian team has already set off, but they'll give up after less than a week. These 3, however, are convinced they can finish the job.
To walk to the North Pole unsupported, you have to be mentally able to do it, and you have to have the physical abilities, and then thirdly, you have to plan the trip very seriously. I think at least we have the 2 first ones, and we also, I think, have the third talent, that we have planned the trip so seriously now for 2 years that we are very well prepared for what's going to meet us up there on the ice.
For me, an unsupported expedition is the ultimate challenge. To go to the North Pole with support, with airdrops or with dogs, it's much easier. Pulling food and fuel for 2 months on a sledge is very difficult, but for me it's the only way to go. There's no way you can cheat. The ice and the struggle is the same now as for 100 years ago. And an unsupported expedition to the North Pole has for many years been looked upon as one of Arctic's last great challenges.
Sir Ranulph Fiennes, he will start with Mike Stroud from the Russian side, and Erling, Børge and myself, who will start from Ellesmere Island. And it will be a race, and as you know, the Norwegian have a great tradition to beat the English in the Antarctic and Arctic, so I'm sure we will win this race.
In 1912, while the Russians were still surveying their own northernmost landmass, the race was on to reach the South Pole, and Norwegian Roald Amundsen got there ahead of Englishman Captain Scott. Scott and his team perished on the way home. But in Britain, Amundsen never enjoyed the recognition he undoubtedly deserved. Scott, meanwhile, became a national hero. Amundsen believed his success was due to the long experience of Norwegian explorers in the harsh conditions of the polar regions. 78 years later, Fiennes' Norwegian rivals have cast themselves in the role of Amundsen, seeing their race to the North Pole as a rematch. They chose to start their daunting trek from the Canadian Arctic. Training first at Iqaluit, they'll fly north toward Hunt Island. Though the pack ice is tougher, the route is shorter by 120 miles. In desolate wastes like these, everything depends on painstaking preparation of clothing and equipment.
To reach the North Pole unsupported is actually a matter of weight, and you just have to find the fine balance between what you really must bring and what you can be without, and we will just take what is absolutely necessary. Everything else is left behind.
Our approach in the planning was to take ideas from the native people in the Arctic, take ideas from what's in the fashion today, and take ideas from our own polar heroes, and put it together and make out the best gear possible for a North Pole expedition.
We think that footwear is among the most important things on an expedition like this, as every other expedition. And lots of expeditions have failed with the footwear. So we have been working very hard with it. And our conclusion is that the best thing is a combination between the Indian and Inuit footwear, mucklucks and chemics, and some boots, ski boots we have designed ourselves. So it's a combination between the old Arctic culture and new high technology.
A lightweight radio has saved the Norwegians more than 20 pounds. It's just a fifth the weight of the equipment carried by Fiennes. Instead of contact with a base camp, the Norwegian team will use a preset frequency to contact airliners flying overhead, using a ski as the antenna. At the British team's Soviet base camp, Ran and Mike Stroud complete their final preparations. Ahead of them, 600 miles of drifting ice. Their choice of a longer route is based on calculations that the ice will drift in their favour, with prevailing winds carrying them northwards. Ran and Mike will have to pull their life-supporting supplies behind them over some of the world's most dangerous terrain. Temperatures will drop below -40 Celsius. Winds will reach gale force. And since goggles will mist up in the freezing snow, blizzards could render them half blind. Everything they carry will have to earn its keep. Most vital, food and fuel. To save weight, Ran and Mike plan to survive on the bare minimum of food intake for such a demanding journey. 5,000 calories a day, dropping to 4,500 calories when the sleds grow lighter. A complex arithmetic of survival that is yet to stand the test. This back-breaking regime is what an unsupported trek is about, and why no one has yet made it unaided to the North Pole.
It's like taking a couple of hundredweight and trying to walk the length of Britain with it, dragging behind you, but choosing not to use the roads and going over the fields instead. The majority of supported expeditions are successful. There's a significant percentage that aren't, which I think just proves how difficult it is, that even despite going with small loads and having resupplies of anything you break or whatever, there are still an appreciable number that don't succeed because in any one year the ice or the climatic conditions can stop even the best prepared expedition. But I am sure that after 2 or 3 attempts that we would have succeeded on one of them. I'm quite sure of that. Do you know what the forecast for the weather is for the next few days?
No.
Because that's also
because
important.
now synoptic map is
Dmitry, the expedition organizer, is a respected and highly decorated Soviet explorer, a veteran of many polar treks.
Dmitry, I'm very happy.
He's taken a close look at Ran's equipment. His verdict is one of extreme caution.
When Dmitry first came over to England and I laid out the plans and the weights and everything else like that, he was non-committal about our chances. However, now we've been over here and he's had a chance to see our equipment, see us dragging our equipment and so on. He hasn't said so to my face, but he has to one of the other members of the team, Morag Howell, who was having a happy evening, a vodka evening as they're called, and she was given to understand that Dmitry thought we had as much chance as a cat in hell.
In Canada, the Norwegians have no doubts about their chances. Their route is shorter and their rations better. 70 days of fuel and upwards of 6,000 precious calories a day. And all three are superior skiers with long experience of tough Arctic conditions.
I think a great advantage for our expedition is that we are all very used to skis. We have been skiing our whole life. And despite that this is different skiing to drag a rope, but it will make a great difference between ourselves and Fiennes expedition.
We are pulling our sledges with a belt around our hips. And we're doing it that way because then we're pulling with our legs. If I had a belt around our breast, we will pulling with the back, and that's not a good thing to do.
Dmitry has also strongly advised the British pair that weather conditions are not right. But on March the 7th, Fiennes and Stroud decide to set off for the pole.
Okay, he's the man.
Yeah, okay. We have 2 big sledges. Yeah. And everything else is small. You want sledges on first?
Okay, let's do it first.
The sleds are loaded aboard a Soviet helicopter that'll fly them north to Cape Artichevsky, an old forward bomber base from the darkest days of the Cold War and the last piece of land before the Arctic Ocean. This is the last time Ran and Mike will see their Soviet colleagues until the long trek is over. Now it's down to hard work, human daring and luck.
I think that the pressure, that is what we call pack here, and pressure ridges over by Canada, is extremely good. I just can't believe I've never seen such good stuff. But in terms of the other side, that's the water, that's the sea, we can't tell, because until you get on it, it's no good talking about 5 centimetres, 10 centimetres, it depends on your sledge weight and everything else like that. So until you get out there, you can't say whether it's going to be bearable, in which case it'll be fast, because you rumble instead of drag, which is great. I haven't heard the noise of these rumbling in 3 years. Or it'll be very tentative, very difficult and very dangerous.
Well, I think we've got a difficult start across some thin ice, but I think it will go okay. And once across that, it looks pretty good, actually. So I would say that we will make at least decent progress, but we've got to remember that other expeditions from here have taken 60 or 70 days, and we've only got 45 days food.
People who brave the north, I think
Okay, now we've got to go.
It's a bizarre picture of politics turned on its head. 2 British sleds rumble down a frozen runway built for Soviet bombers to launch attacks against US targets in the 50s. Today's mission has a more benign objective. The British trek is sponsored mile by mile to raise money for the Multiple Sclerosis Society. Ran and Mike have enough food and fuel for 45 days, and more than 500 miles to the North Pole with no outside support. Yet even with support, no other team has ever done it in less than 55 days. If they're to succeed, the 2 men will need to make unprecedented progress, dragging their 300-pound sleds and a tiny video camera for more than 10 hours a day through some of the worst conditions on the planet. With the British polar team now 1 day ahead of them, the Norwegians fly to remote Wardhunt Island, the last outpost of land in northern Canada, and the place Ranulph Fiennes launched his last 3 unsuccessful attempts to reach the pole unaided. The plane lands on a snow-swept ice shelf, and the team readies itself for departure. When the plane takes off again, the nearest civilization will be 700 miles away. Their small VHF radio the only link with the outside world. Ahead of them, a no-man's land of deep crevasses and ice boulders 40 feet high. Survival and success now depends on the simplest details. How deep is the snow? Will the sleds perform as planned? Will their equipment do the job? It won't be long before the team hit a snag, and with 60 more days ahead of them, even Berger's natural optimism wanes.
Day 1. We arrived at Ward Hunt, unloaded the sledges and set off. We have left civilization behind and don't know when we will see it again. I'm thinking about home and what lies ahead of us. Right now, I'm not 100% sure if we will make it or not.
The Norwegians find it tough going through the thick jungle of ice. The temperature drops to -60. In conditions like this 80 years ago, Peary had cut off 7 of his frostbitten toes with a knife. Ran and Mike, meanwhile, are finding good surfaces and have pushed on hard for the first 2 days. Even Ran's radio operator Flo finds his sceptical Russian colleagues are impressed with the mileage already covered.
The information we had was very good. They actually made today 12.65 miles, which is outstanding. We call that sort of a Mach 8, which is sort of going somewhat. Going with that and yesterday's distance of 5 miles in the 3.5 hours they travelled yesterday. We are delighted.
This is good, this is very good. And now I believe more than before start. And I must say that for every expedition, every polar expedition, the start is very important.
But even when things are going well, in conditions like this, the slightest event can spell big trouble.
Tonight, the male coax would not go into the female coax of the radio antenna, and of course I had to put it in there before getting into the tent, which meant taking off both gloves. My fingers were too cold to be able to twist it into home, and every second they're getting colder, as we're well into the -30s with the breeze. And so I've now ended up with a very sore white thumb.
My moods go up and down all over the place. One minute I'm incredibly optimistic about things and I'm already planning the celebrations when we get there. And the next minute I think it's all pointless and we haven't got a chance of getting there at all. And I find it very difficult to regulate those. And with the changes of morale come changes in how efficiently you pull. And if you don't pull fast and hard enough and enthusiastically enough, you start getting cold, and it all gets into a vicious circle.
For the Norwegians too, it'll be hard going. Huge pressure ridges and drift snow block their path.
We have traveled over a lot of thin ice, a lot of open leads, but there is only one way to go, and that is north.
Even meticulous planning can't protect them from unforeseen events like a broken ski shoe, a minor piece of bad luck that could prove disastrous. But Berger is a master of self-help and innovation.
Today my ski shoe broke after just 1 week on the ice. It looks bad, and we all know how important skis are if we shall make it to the pole in time. Luckily, I am able to repair it. By heating a nail over the burner, I melt a row of holes in the sole and lashing it together with a parachute cord. It looks good now, and the repair seems to take the strain.
Every night they pitch camp precariously in the snow-covered wilderness, sleeping fitfully on dangerous, shifting pack ice that shrieks as it moves. There's the ever-present fear that the ice will shear off, dragging you down into the open chasm beneath you. Getting up each morning in sub-zero temperatures after a few hours broken sleep calls for colossal willpower. The body has just begun to thaw from the previous day. Now it's back to the 10-hour grind through the Arctic wilds. At daybreak, everything has to be dried. Any moisture left on clothes or bedding will freeze permanently, adding extra weight and making sleep more difficult the following night.
Nå går lyden. Skramling av kanner.
The high-energy daily diet is always the same. Porridge mixed with fat, sugar and high-fat chocolate, with freeze-dried meat and rice or potatoes for dinner. Even then, it's a welcome chance to warm freezing hands over a steaming bowl of food. This daily routine would break even the most hardy Inuit. As you move, you sweat. When you stop to rest, the sweat freezes. Such was the pervasive sense of hunger that Børge Ausland's diary became filled with crazy recipes as he fantasized about pork roasts, spaghetti and creamed mushrooms. The one daily treat was a few morsels of chocolate. But at these temperatures it calls for teeth of steel.
During the lunch break today, I broke a tooth because the lunch pack was so hard. Did hurt a lot, and I felt a bit sorry for myself, but now we are used temporary filling into it, and it feels a lot better. I'd rather chew on the other side the rest of the trip.
It could have been worse. Out here, a ruptured appendix or blood poisoning could well prove fatal. Across the Arctic Ocean, Ran and Mike are still making rapid progress. Though, contrary to the prediction of their Russian advisors, the ice is not drifting them to the pole, but away from it. Soon, too, there is an unexpected mishap. Though seemingly insignificant, in these Arctic extremes, it could spell the difference between success and failure.
For a start, my ski binding broke last night. After finding the delights of being able to actually pull the sledge on skis in reasonable ground, the shearing of one of the pins in the binding, quite a thick pin, was quite irreparable, and I've had to throw the skis away. That doesn't affect our rate very much at the moment, but we had been planning at the end to try and go very fast over the last week or two on skis all the time, and that's obviously gone, so there's a few days that might be critical when it actually comes to the speed at the end. And then the other thing is that we've realised that we're definitely drifting backwards rather than drifting to the north.
The Norwegians, too, are battling against atrocious conditions, their route constantly blocked by open water and deep crevasses. Then, on day 9, the Norwegian expedition takes a dramatic turn. Gear is dragged into a ravine. His 250-pound sled crashes on top of him, causing severe injury to his back. For him, the journey to the pole is over.
Geir can't go on. He's in a lot of pain. This is one of the worst things that could happen.
They decide to call in an aircraft, but bad weather delays the plane for 4 days. While they wait, the 3 Norwegians live off Geir's food. And all the time, the drifting ice is carrying them back the way they came.
We walked south to find a landing strip. I had to walk twice with Geir's sledge. and those few kilometers with the sledge was one of the heaviest on the whole trip so far. Today we said goodbye to Geir. Nobody said much. I was near to tears and I could see that he was too. To remain as an unsupported expedition, Geir had to take everything with him. Now I'm thinking, will we reach the pole or will we have to be lifted off the ice further north?
Erling and Berger carry on alone, but the 4-day wait for the airplane is to become an issue of contention between the two teams. The British say the 96-hour rest period and the use of Geir's food supplies amounts to support, a critical respite from the exacting arithmetic of Arctic survival. When they hear the news on the radio, Ran and Mike believe they are now the only unsupported team left on the pack ice. The Norwegians press on, but without their film equipment. That went back with Geir. From here on, their progress will be recorded with still photographs. They soon encounter serious problems as the ice becomes dangerously thin.
Today we crossed a newly frozen lead. The ice was a bit too thin. The ski stick went through. Then the ice began to move up and down. I fell through and my legs got totally wet. We have no spare clothes, so I had to walk on, wet and freezing. Last night we drifted 6 kilometers backwards and really felt like a waste of time to walk those kilometers once more. My toe has a bad blizzard. It looks worse than it is. We drain it every evening, bandage it, and it works well during the day, fortunately. The news that Fiennes is ahead of us has dampened our spirits. We discussed whether we should go on even harder. Berger doesn't seem too keen. I hope he will change his mind tomorrow.
Day after day, the two teams struggle on through the same soul-destroying routine, fighting the bitter cold and treacherous pack ice. Ran and Mike, meanwhile, find themselves confronting yet another Arctic hazard, vast stretches of open water. Some can be crossed using the sleds as makeshift boats. Other stretches are thick, icy sludge. There's no option but to wait, hoping the water will freeze and offer a passage across. After 29 days on the pack ice, they've covered nearly 300 miles. But dragging the heavy sleds over such hostile terrain is taking its toll. Trudging through knee-deep snow without skis is causing serious problems for Stroud.
And the problem really is that pulling the sledge, I'm leaning so far forward and my rigid plastic boots are just eating into the front of my shin. And I'm going to have to cut the front of the boot away unless we change to backpacking now, which we've been considering for a few days. We're not going fast enough, and we've done some tests this afternoon, and although the packs are incredibly heavy, it does mean we think we can carry them.
Switching to 90-pound backpacks means what they gain in extra speed, they lose by giving up much-needed gear. And with no sleds, they'll be stuck if they come across open water. Food supplies are now below 4,000 calories a day. Throwing away the radio would save valuable weight, but Stroud is reluctant. His wife is about to give birth, and he's torn by conscience. He agrees to carry the extra 20 pounds himself. Hundreds of miles away, edging his way towards the pole, Berger too is thinking of home.
I miss my son a lot, of course, and do not exactly feel like the perfect father, leaving home for 3 months to ski to the North Pole. But I still hope and believe that what I'm doing now can give him something positive when he grows up.
Day 32, and this backpacking has been hell so far. They're so heavy, and the pains they give me in my back are just killing me. And this morning, they overwhelmed my conscience, if you like, and I threw away the radio. and I felt bad about that ever since. It seems to me that I'm being inhuman for the sake of success, but it was either that or give up, and I can't give up now, so the radio's gone, and it's helped a bit.
Mike's got a number of injuries. 3 days ago I got in the tent, found my nose was bleeding, my chin was bleeding, my left heel was excruciating, I'm not sure what the hell's going on with it, and my right foot at the toe end of it was 5 black nails, big puffy bruised and bloody toes themselves, and the little toe where the skin graft was just a mess of frostbite.
Just past 88 degrees north, with little more than 100 miles to go, Ran and Mike suddenly feel their strength ebbing away. Both men have lost nearly a third of their body weight since setting out, adding to the cold and exhaustion. And every footstep is potentially a calamity.
I turned round and waited for Mike, who was about 500 yards behind, and I saw his little figure in the distance, and then I heard the one word "ran," which he shouted quite loud, luckily, and so I rushed back as fast as I could, and when I got there I found that he was right down a 5-foot drop in a canal and was stuck in this sludge, sort of holding on to one bank, but right down inside it. His pack was right down inside it, wedging him there, and as long as he held on, he wasn't going to sink down into the ice and disappear under the sludge. But it was quite obvious that he wasn't going to be able to hold on for much longer, and I managed to get one of his ski sticks, but he and his sodden pack were very, very heavy, and I was, I suppose, weaker than I should have been, and couldn't pull him out. And at this moment, I realized that here we were, nearly 400 miles from sort of people, and there was nothing I could do. At that point I realized he was going to drown, and that point I think gave me extra strength, and I gave a great lurch back. Mike got either his foot or his pack wedged against the far side of the canal, and from that moment on we gradually, slowly and pretty painfully on Mike's hands managed to get him out of this death trap. And I just thought, had I been half a mile ahead, as very often is the case, and just sort of waiting for him, what would have happened?
Both teams face the ever-present danger of a sudden break in the moving ocean of ice, plunging them into the freezing water, where their sleds or backpacks might drag them downwards, never to be seen again. The Norwegians have become bogged down. Drifting ice has robbed them of hard-won miles. They encounter more open water, but at least they can still cross it.
We came to a big open lead today. It was so large that we couldn't walk around it, so we tied the sledges together and tried it out. We loaded up and paddled back and forth with the gear. The boat was freezing up and the wind was very cold, but after 2 hours we made it.
The two Britons are growing extremely weak. The gamble of the backpacks has not paid off. They've covered the miles, but open water is a major problem, slowing them down and causing them to waste precious supplies.
Day 39, and we're stopped again at open water, unable to find a way across the canal, and just sitting here, wasting food and fuel. We have discussed not eating at all, but have decided that we've just got to keep our strength up. We are definitely getting weaker and more vulnerable to the cold now, and we're having problems.
My vision for 3 days now has been getting worse and worse. Mike has tried to see what is wrong with the actual eye looking at it and can't see anything. He hasn't got an ophthalmic scope, but from the point of view of trying to use the eyes, all you can see is double or treble focus, and for 3 days I could discern blue ice against the white snow, but now today everything is white, and if I see Mike ahead I can see 3 of him.
Ran has lost all but the faintest glimmer of eyesight. After leading all the way, he can now only move forward, led by Mike with a ski pole. Both are exhausted. Stroud himself is stricken by hypoglycemia, brought on by starvation. It can only be a matter of time before they face reality. The Norwegians are still a long way behind, but they're stronger and have plenty of food.
We walked 15 hours today. I'm sure we're going faster than Fiennes, but we are very exhausted. But we are also sure that Fiennes, because of his lack of food, is having an even worse time than we're having.
After a couple of hours, I had to give up. And I knew for an hour before that it was going to happen, but I didn't want to do it. Because I knew that if I said to Ran, really, I have to stop, that this was going to be it. That we might do some little bits to get a bit further for the last couple of days of our food, but I suppose I'd still hope that somehow miraculously we would feel better, or the snow surfaces would get better and firmer, and we'd be walking again and somehow manage to stretch our spare suits so that we could go on for several days and we'd get there or something. It was never realistic, and I suppose in that sense I've never been a realist. After a couple of hours when we had stopped today, I wanted to go on again, and Ran said, look, we're not going to get there, and and you're being stupid, and I was being stupid. I just have got too tired, and the days of walking through soft snow with a heavy pack and the loss of weight are just too much, and so we're going to have to just get another couple of days on and then call for removal.
Fiennes and Stroud were just 90 miles short of the North Pole, having spent 47 gruelling days on one of the most arduous polar journeys ever made. Exhausted and dangerously thin, they were taken by a Soviet helicopter to a floating ice station. Rand's weight loss has transformed him into a living skeleton, seriously weak and almost blind. Even now, the Arctic extremes don't let up. It's 6 days before a plane can land on the ice station to fly them back to the mainland. They can barely make it to the aircraft, such is their physical condition after 7 weeks in the icy wilderness. Frustrated by their failure, they were to be heartened by finding out their expedition had raised over £1.25 million for the Multiple Sclerosis Society. Ironically, they'd travelled further than the entire distance from Canada to the pole, in all more than 500 nautical miles. They also believed that the Norwegians were no longer unsupported, a view not shared by their two rivals.
I'm just about to go out to chop freshwater ice when I see a polar bear only 25 meters away. I shout to Erling and search for my gun. The bear walks a bit back and forth, then it comes for us. I try to scare it away with a warning shot, but it keeps charging. When it's only 8 meters away, we have no other choice and shoot it in the chest with 3 bullets. It shakes when the bullets hits the body. Then it turns back and falls over. It's a beautiful animal, but it was him or us. If it had attacked us while we were in the tent or on our way, we might as well have been the victims.
Erling and Berger were now less than 2 degrees from the North Pole. Thinking they were behind the British, they stepped up the pace, often sprinting 15 hours at a stretch.
We are pushing on really hard towards the pole now, and we're always wondering, is Fiennes still on the ice?
As usual, it's been a hard day. The pack ice set us back several hours, but now the North Pole is ours.
On May the 4th, 58 days after they'd set off, Erling and Berger arrived at the North Pole. They'd made it, but didn't know if they were first.
It's May the 4th. We finally made it. We shook hands, hugged each other, and collapsed. Our food has nearly gone, and we've been out of radio contact for 2 weeks. The pickup plane arrived with our partner Geir, and he was so choked with emotions he couldn't even speak. What about the British? I asked. Didn't you know? They gave up a long time ago. So we made it. The first successful and supported expedition to the North Pole.
But were they? The Royal Geographical Society in London plays host to a detailed debate about the race to the North Pole. According to Ranulph Fiennes and Dr. Mike Stroud, Gehr's accident and the 4-day rest period that followed destroyed the Norwegian claim to an unsupported trek. The Norwegians countered by calling Fiennes and Stroud bad losers.
Nobody has reached the North Pole without support. Neither Russians, Norwegians, Americans, nor British, the various people who have tried. Nobody has reached the North Pole without support.
Mike Stroud and Erling Kagge shared the same platform in the Royal Geographical Society's main hall.
If someone did a marathon, broke the world record, but said, well, I stopped for a while, but I don't think it made any difference, it wouldn't be accepted. If someone climbed Everest without oxygen, but said, well, there was a bit of oxygen, but it wouldn't have made any difference, the same would apply. Just because it was at the very beginning of the journey gives you the illusion that it was of no physiological benefit. But I would suggest that if we'd have had 4 days of rest somewhere in the expedition, even at the very beginning, then that 4 days of rest might have staved off our debilitation at the end enough for us to reach the pole.
I'm not planning to go into details of what's correct and what's incorrect about what Stroud said. Obviously, things are incorrect, but I should remind you, you're into Captain Scott, who I presume is a hero of everybody here, including myself. On his cross at Cape Evans in the Antarctic, it says something like, to strive, to seek, and to find, and not to yield. I do think you should remember that, because it's a hero of you. And if you're not happy with the way we did it, you're very welcome to try yourself next year. Thank you.
Whatever the merits of those two competing views, it seems sad that such an epic story should end in disagreement, and that after all the toil and sweat, the dangers and the achievement, two teams of brave adventurers should finish up, poles apart.